Here's the second thing, and this goes back to the ranking member's comments about yesterday. To me, yesterday was an awful day in the history of this committee. It set new low after new low after new low. And I'm not going to talk about all of the new lows. I'm going to talk about one in particular. And that is whether anybody noticed the irony that the day before the United States Department of Justice arraigned a former FBI director for allegedly making untruthful statements to this committee, the Attorney General of the United States sat right there and made untruthful statements to this committee. And they weren't maybe untruthful statements. This wasn't a question of nuance. She made allegations about the ranking member and me having received political contributions from some, she said, Epstein close confidant. Well, guess what? That's actually checkable. There's a thing called the Federal Election Commission. The Federal Election Commission keeps a website that tracks all of our contributions. An intern at the Department of Justice could have checked to see that the allegation, I'll leave it to myself, that I had received campaign contributions from this individual, that was false. And it's not a maybe answer. It's a yes or no. Did I or didn't I? And there's an unimpeachable record that shows that what she said sitting right there was not true. If we are going to care about untruthful statements made by the Department of Justice and the FBI in this committee, let's not have this be yet another area where there are different rules for one party than for the other party. And just by the way, on that very subject, the other thing that the Attorney General did sitting right there was to strip all cover away from the untruthful statements that had been made to this committee by the current FBI director. You all heard him here. He said that he couldn't tell us about his grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case, where he first pled the Fifth, then got immunity, and then testified. He couldn't tell us what he testified to, he said, because the Department of Justice had sealed the testimony and because there was a court order barring him from doing that. And he actually identified which judge, the chief judge of the D.C. Federal District Court. Well, guess what? We know that since then, the chief judge of the Federal District Court has said that that was not true. He said specifically nothing prevented Director Patel from discussing his grand jury testimony. And yesterday, the Attorney General had the chance to say, you're right. We did seal the testimony in that matter. The Department of Justice did seal the testimony, and Patel's statement was true. Not about the court order, but at least it was sealed by the Department of Justice. She didn't say that. So now both his testimony that the DOJ had sealed his testimony and his testimony there was a court order barring his testimony are kind of demonstrably false statements to this committee. And then when he came back and we challenged him on those false statements, his second false statement was to say, I'm not going to answer any of those questions because my transcript of the grand jury testimony, I've worked with the DOJ to see that it is publicly released. Well, it either has been publicly released or it hasn't. It's a very simple distinction, yes or no. And we all know that it has not, in fact, been publicly released. And when we asked about that from the Attorney General, again, she left him high and dry and refused to say that anything had been publicly released, that there was any publicly released transcript. So yesterday, stands in really stark contrast. I should say the day before yesterday stands in really stark contrast to yesterday. Yesterday, an FBI director was arraigned for making a false statement. The day before that, the Attorney General of the United States made arguably even falser statements. We'll see how the other case turns out. And she left the current FBI director completely exposed on his multiple false statements that his grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case had been sealed by the department, was under court order not to be released, and had since been publicly released as a transcript. I don't know if this committee is going to take itself seriously enough to treat false statements to this committee as serious matters, irrespective of who made them. But the contrast is really stark. Thank you, Chairman.
In what will almost certainly be recorded as one of the most devastating, meticulously documented, and existentially chilling performances ever delivered in the history of congressional oversight, Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island transformed a routine December 2025 Senate Judiciary Committee hearing into a merciless, ice-cold indictment of Trump-appointed Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel, accusing both of the highest law enforcement officials in the United States of lying under oath to Congress literally 24 hours after the Department of Justice had itself arraigned a former FBI director for making false statements to the exact same committee, an irony so perfectly symmetrical, so breathtaking in its hypocrisy, that Whitehouse opened by declaring it an awful day in the history of this committee, new low after new low after new low. A phrase so apocalyptic coming from the normally restrained senator that the room itself seemed to freeze. He began with Bondi, who had sat in the witness chair the previous day and, under oath and on live national television, explicitly accused Whitehouse and the ranking Democrat of accepting campaign contributions from an individual she labeled a close confidant of Jeffrey Epstein, a direct, grave, and, crucially, 100% checkable allegation because every federal campaign dollar in America is publicly recorded and searchable in real time on the Federal Election Commission website, a fact so elementary that any DOJ intern with a laptop could have verified it in 30 seconds, yet the public database shows zero contributions from that person to either senator, not 1 cent, not ever, making Bondi's statement not a mistake, not a nuance, not a misrecollection, but an objectively, provably, database-confirmed lie delivered under oath by the Attorney General of the United States. Whitehouse let that indictment settle like smoke before driving the blade deeper. On Tuesday, the Trump DOJ had proudly announced the criminal arraignment of a former FBI director for allegedly lying to this very committee, yet on Monday the sitting Attorney General had committed the identical offense with evidence just as public and conclusive, raising the searing question: if lying to Congress is serious enough to indict a career official one day, how can the nation's top law enforcement officer do the same the day before and face zero consequences, zero correction, zero accountability before? Pivoting to the even more damning second act, how Bondi's deliberate silence had stripped every shred of cover from FBI Director Kash Patel, leaving him utterly exposed for a cascade of his own falsehoods. Patel had previously told the committee he could not discuss his immunized grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case because 1. The DOJ had sealed the transcript and 2. The chief judge of the D.C. Federal District Court had issued a specific protective order barring disclosure, even naming the judge on the record, except the chief judge later issued a public written clarification that no such order ever existed and nothing legally prevented Patel from speaking, rendering both excuses fiction. When pressed again, Patel added a third lie, claiming he had worked with DOJ to get the transcript publicly released. Months later, no transcript has ever appeared. When Bondi was questioned the day before the former director's arraignment, she had the perfect opportunity to say at least part of Patel's story. Yes, DOJ sealed it, even if there was no court order, yet she said nothing, refusing to clarify, correct, or defend, deliberately abandoning the sitting FBI director to 3 consecutive, independently disproven statements made under oath. Whitehouse tied it all together with a question that cut to the marrow. If the Trump DOJ believes lying to Congress is so grave it will indict one man on Tuesday, how can it tolerate its own leadership committing the same crime on Monday with impunity, creating a two-tier system where the law is a weapon against the out-of-favor and a shield for the currently powerful? For Whitehouse, this was not mere partisan hypocrisy, but the death knell of meaningful congressional oversight. When oaths are enforced selectively, hearings become scripted theater, subpoenas become suggestions, and the American people learn that truth itself is negotiable depending on who holds power. In 12 scorching minutes, armed only with public databases, the judge's own written statement, and the continued non-existence of any transcript, Sheldon Whitehouse did not simply humiliate Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. He held up a mirror to a nation and forced millions of viewers to confront, in real time, the emergence of a justice system where one former FBI director is prosecuted for falsehoods while the new guardians of the law lie with equal boldness and are protected by their own silence and the silence of those above them. What happened that day was far bigger than any single official's embarrassment. It was a 5-alarm warning that unless the principle of equal justice under law is restored, regardless of party or position, the idea of accountable government will continue to erode, one unpunished lie at a time. And in an era of viral soundbites and manufactured outrage, Sheldon Whitehouse's calm, methodical, devastating performance may well be remembered as one of the final moments a United States senator stood on the floor and demanded, on behalf of every citizen who still believes facts should matter, that the law finally apply the same to the powerful as it does to everyone else.